What's up, everybody? Welcome to Thursday's edition of Morning Cuppa Hockey. A lot of great games last night around the NHL, but this is presented by Bet365. Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets, whatever the sport, whatever the moment. It's never ordinary at Bet365. So use our code DAILY365. That's Colby Cohen. I'm Jonny Lazarus. We got a great interview coming today with Glenn Hefferan, the Commissioner of the United States Hockey League. We'll also catch up with the third member of our show, Pat Maroon, about the first game ever in Utah a little bit later in the show. But before we do any of that, Colby, there were 5 games last night, a ton of surprising scores. Which one stood out to you the most, and what are you laughing at me already about?
Well, I'll be honest with you. When we first started the show, you had like a little bit of a frozen moment there.
Honestly,
I'm sitting there going, is he having like a Ron Burgundy moment where he's looking for a teleprompter? And then before I could even chirp you, we have Jeremiah in the chat saying, "Hey, Jonny, you're live right now."
What happened was, I'll tell you what happened. I was looking at the YouTube screen and not our StreamYard screen. So it was like a little delayed. And I realized I was like, oh shit, I'm on YouTube, not StreamYard. And it's funny because like we really tried to emphasize the start to the show today. Like in our pre-production meeting, we were like, Jonny, let's hit it hard. It's Thursday. Like a lot of fun last night. Make sure the intro is on point. And what do? I just like, what was it? I was like staring at the screen. So that's my bad, guys. I'm still on a high from last night. Big New York sports night. The Rangers win, the Mets win, the Yankees win.
How about the way the Mets won too?
Oh, it's unreal.
I don't even want to talk about it. But look,
unreal.
I'll tell you what. I was very annoyed last night that there was so many games at 10 p.m. Like come 10 p.m., all I have it in me is to focus on one game. All right. So ease up with the 3 10 p.m. games. But yeah, look, I think we saw a lot of bad goaltending last night. Couple games with good goaltending, but the majority of what we saw last night in the National Hockey League was bad goaltending. We really did. And, you look at all the goals scored, and I'm not going to sit here and necessarily blame the goaltenders, right? It's like we're not blaming Korpisalo for the Bruins' first loss, but there's a difference when you have Igor Shesterkin, who makes a couple of saves early in that hockey game to keep Pittsburgh off the board, to keep the life out of that team. And then all of a sudden the Rangers get on a little bit of a roll, and they just take all in any of the hope that Pittsburgh could have had to get a good start to their season. And that's where I constantly, point to goaltending. And that's why I constantly say, if you have a guy like Igor, if you have a guy like Swayman, like any of these top tier goaltenders,
Hellebuck last night too, again,
you find you find a way to make it work from a deal standpoint, because you see the difference between that first tier of guys. Look out in Vancouver, Shilovs, he was beyond average last night for his hockey club. I mean, no stinkers, but like come up with a couple of saves. If Thatcher Demko's in the net last night, he shuts some of those down. Vancouver wins that hockey game, and it wasn't
really hurt our bet of the night.
Of course it did, but
I felt so good. 4-1 after the first. I was like, the Canucks are a wagon. We got this.
Yeah, but listen, you just see what the difference is. Look at Edmonton. Stuart Skinner was an average goaltender last night. Now, granted, Edmonton managed the puck like a peewee team. They puck watched in the defensive zone. One turnover after another. It started with Bouchard early in the game, and I know Skinner made that save. But look, I know Skinner only let in 5 of the 6 because they eventually brought in Pickard. But like, again, that's the difference between Igor, who shuts the door early in a hockey game. When the Rangers came out and they were a little bit casual with the puck, and Lavi said as much in his bench interview. He didn't love the way his team started. And then they get the first one, they get the second one, they get on a roll. And the second half of the game, I mean, the Rangers were just such a better team. It wasn't even really close. And then, of course, we have to give your boy a lot of love. 3 points last night. He's on pace for 8 times 3? 240 points. Lafreniere is on pace for the season.
Well, let's not get into the overreactions just yet, because I do want to make this a sponsored segment by our friends at OutWest. We'll call this the OutWest Overreactions. So for a limited time, when you purchase any 3 of our premium polos, you'll get a 4th item of your choice from our entire site for free. Whether you're looking to upgrade your wardrobe with high-quality modern activewear or stock up on essentials for your winter golf trip, now's the perfect time to shop and grab a free one on us. So visit outwestgolf.com today to take advantage of this exclusive offer. Out West, every game needs an outlaw, and use our code Cuppa, CUPPA, in all caps. I'm rocking their new hat. A great hat, fits me very well. Colby actually complimented me. The flow is looking pretty good in this thing, and Colby's got the sweatshirt on. But let's get into some overreactions, because there were a lot of different storylines that we can look at last night. Obviously, it's Lafreniere for me, but the Rangers power play goes, I think 0 for 2 on the night. So the man advantage didn't look good. Lafreniere wasn't on it. Maybe that's something they switch up. But the Rangers, absolute wagon, 6-0 on the road in Pittsburgh. There are other storylines to look at too, though, Colby. I mean, we talked about Stuart Skinner, like you just said before, not looking as great as he finished off last year. And we had some comments in our YouTube chat saying, like, show more love to Stuart Skinner.
Yeah.
Go out and let up sit.
Put some respect on his name, I think is what was said to us.
But one thing that we didn't mention either is that 8-4 game in Vegas. Like, Vegas, I feel like, was a team that I don't know if you were as low on as I was. Not that I was like super low, but we were questioning, or at least I was questioning, what they were going to look like without some key pieces that we've seen in the past. But their decor obviously is incredible, even though they let up 4 last night. But an offensive explosion from Jack Eichel, 4 assists. Barbashev has a sick backhand goal.
It's time to talk about Eichel like one of the best players in the National Hockey League. And you look at the talent they have on their blue line, and you look at Pietrangelo, Theodore, Hannafin makes a beautiful play last night on a goal, but Hannafin is such a good skater. He's also a good defender. He takes time and space away from everyone. You've got McNabb. It's such a good group back there in Vegas, and they're well coached. They are. And we did have a question in the chat about them from Pavel Kadula. I don't know. How did Barbashev look last night? Will he stick with that first line and first PP? And I know I responded in the chat, but I'll just say this. Bruce Cassidy, big what have you done for me lately guy. Like, it's not like Barbashev has a big enough body of work where Bruce is going to give him a really long leash. But if he can string together a couple of weeks where he really fits in well on that top group, then all of a sudden that leash gets a little longer. And I think he has an opportunity to kind of build his game with that top group. So
Barbashev's actually, Colby, not to cut you off, but he's one of those guys I mentioned. I had like 3 5-leg parlays of players to score a certain amount of goals. Barbashev was one of the guys who was plus 115 to score 20 goals this year. Like, he's a guy who's been like a fringe 20 goal scorer. And if he can stick there, like there's no reason to think he can score 30.
Right. Yeah. I mean, listen,
that backhand goal was disgusting. I mean, it should have been saved, but oh my God, that was
I know, but should have been saved. It's like, if it does get saved, we're not talking about it. We're just talking about a routine backhand play in the National Hockey League. But back to my original point, and I see Jim the Swede with a comment. If you don't have elite goaltending, you don't get away with making mistakes. Goalies like Igor, Helly, they make the other team's mistakes go away. That's why you pay 11.7 if they ask. And look, like, Igor Shesterkin is betting on himself. I love it, clearly. And last night was a good way to start. Now, not dissimilar to the way Utah looked against Chicago. It is the Pittsburgh Penguins. It is a team that we think could be hanging out around the bottom of the Metro. It's a reality. That Pittsburgh team looks slow. They're well coached, but they just look slow, right? When you're slow to puck battles, no matter who you have, it's hard to come up with those 50-50 pucks. And, you look at the way even Bruce Cassidy talked about it in his in-bench interview during the game last night with, the sideline reporter for TNT. Actually, it wasn't. It was Darren Pang. But, he said the best time to attack and the best time to transition and the best time to get out of your zone is off of wall battles. So when you're late into those wall battles because you lack overall team speed, you're going to be chasing the puck all night. So great rookie lap for Rutger McGroarty. Good to see. He only played about 12 minutes last night. It's going to be a work in progress. He's a kid. We all know the story. He's been on this show. Good for him. So look, I think last night, bad goaltending on display. The Leafs, not a bad game for the Leafs. I'll give Anthony Stolarz credit. He played well. I wonder how much we're going to see of him this year. Honestly, maybe a lot. Not enough if I'm a Maple Leaf fan, I'm not super disappointed in them. But what I will say is that they got to get more on the inside. Like if you get against the goalie who's seeing the puck well, like Montembeault was, you've got to have better puck recoveries. You've got to have more pressure inside the hash marks. It's not that dissimilar to kind of how the Rangers started last night, a little bit on the peripheral, but then the Rangers got inside on the offense and the rest is history. So what else what else from last night before we get to Glenn Hefferan? I know he's going to join us here any minute.
Well, with the Rangers, there was just one thing I wanted to point out, courtesy of Jackie Redmond, which is a huge X factor in what we had talked about, which could be a difference for the Rangers and what could have been a difference for them last year, that third line. And I feel like there's a lot of questions about Hedl and Kakko, right? Those are the two unknowns this year. But Hedl, Kakko, and Cooley last night, the Rangers third line, they had a goal taken away from them, but they outchanced Pittsburgh 12-3. They had 6 high danger chances over Pittsburgh's 2 when they were out there on the ice. Shots were 10-3, and they outscored them 1-0. Like, that third line, I thought last night was huge for the Rangers. Like, and you need your third line to do that. And a championship team needs a third line to contribute. Last year the Rangers only got 2 or 3 goals in the entire playoffs from the third line. So, that's, I think, a big area for, I don't want to say concern going into the year, but that's an area that people had a lot of question marks for the Rangers, because can Filipino stay healthy? What can Kaapo Kakko do? And Will Cooley was, a pretty responsible guy last year. And that was just like a stat that I saw on Twitter that I wanted to point out.
Great start for Hedl getting a goal. Look, I want to stress this, and then we're going to get to Glenn because he just joined here in a second. But I want to stress how important for a guy who is a scorer, how important it is to get off to a good start. Let's talk about Alexis Lafreniere. For him to wake up this morning and to look at his stat line and see 1 game, 3 points.
2 points. They took away an assist.
The confidence that you have from that is just absolutely massive. And here's a good look at his goal. And now look, Pettersson defended this play as bad as you possibly could. But you know what? High-end puck, boys. It's smart defensive hockey by Artemi Panarin. And look, you watch Lafreniere's right skate as Pettersson starts to lay out on this video. Go ahead, Vic. Let it roll through. You watch his right skate. It looks like we're having a little bit of a problem with the video. He does a nice job of angling his right skate just in order to make sure that if Pettersson does swing his stick, his right skate's probably going to block it. But that's a great example of why I hate seeing defensemen in open ice go long body. There's a time for it. Not many guys are good at it. That certainly was not the time, but it doesn't take away from the skill, the poise, the confidence to make that play. But you and I talked about this all year. If he's going to be an 80-point guy, let's just say point-a-game player. Let's start there, okay? You got to have points in garbage time, right? Like, I didn't know they took away an assist from him. I thought he had 3 assists. But in a 6-0 game, that's the thing for him. Last year, they'd win 5-1 and he'd have no points. And then they'd lose, 4-2 and he'd have both goals. Like in garbage time, you got to score. You got to pick up second assists. You got to get freebies if you're going to be an 82-point or more guy. So good start for him. Look, I still don't think he's getting 100 this year, but seeing him get 2 points on opening night, seeing the poise and the confidence with the puck, it's certainly
encouraging.
It's encouraging for a guy who I know you have a lot of belief in, and it's looking like it's a reasonable take by you. So anything else on the Rangers before we bring Glenn in and we talk to him a little bit?
The only other thing I just wanted to say about last night's game was it was great to see Cole Caulfield score his first goal.
Absolutely.
And the way he did it.
I hope he has 50 goals this year.
Yeah.
Like, if you could ever do something for karma, and I'm not saying that's why he did it, so don't twist my words. No. But if there is such a thing as the hockey gods, which we all do believe in, and there is such a thing as good karma, the decision for him to change his number to 13, when numbers are so personal to guys, they're so personal to players, to just, I'm changing my number because he was my favorite player. Like, to do that, man, is he going to have the hockey gods on his side? Johnny is going to be looking down from heaven, smiling on him, helping him, make sure he gets those good bounces. If you believe in that stuff, and I very much do believe in that stuff, Jonny is going to be looking out for Cole. And I just think that whole situation, every time he scores, I feel like we're all going to get chills every single time he scores. So with that, let's bring in Glenn Hefferan. We've been talking about having him on all week. We talked about having him on last year. He's the commissioner and president of the United States Hockey League, which is the #1 league in the United States. It's a massive feeder for the NHL, the NCAA, you name it. So it's good to have you this morning, Glenn. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, guys.
So look, I wanted to start this off, and then, Jonny will eventually chime in here and probably ask you.
I was cut 2 years in a row by the USHL, so I don't even know if I can talk.
Some sort of goofy question here, Glenn, but let's just start with this. Okay, give us a little state of the union on the United States Hockey League, because I do feel like we have a lot of our show's listeners and followers that are Canadian. They know a lot about the CHL. They don't know a lot about the USHL because, with the USHL, what's different than in Canada is our USHL, and you correct me if I'm wrong, it is the main feeder to the NCAA, which is then our main feeder to the NHL, right? Where in Canada, you don't have that step in between, right? So I don't think the USHL is as well known in Canada. So give us a state of the union on the health of the league, because for people who know about it, it's booming.
I will tell you, I was with a Division I coach a few months back during our draft, and he said, the USHL is more than a development league; it's a survival league. The players that we get just know how to survive. They're battle tested because the league is so tough to play in. So the state of the union of the league has never been better. Just to go through some of the numbers, what is there, about 800 NHL players on rosters? 195 of them are USHL alum. There's about 1,800 Division I college hockey players. 910 of them are tied to the USHL. So, and it's not just there. The American League, the USHL over the last 12 seasons has put over 3,000 players into the American Hockey League. Now, if you looked at last year's NHL rosters, 78% of those players will play in the American Hockey League before they play in the National Hockey League. So we're developing them to every single level. And the nice part, I think the strong part about our league is that players leave at their development pace. They're not tied to a contract. They don't have to play a certain number of years. If they get drafted and it's a college route for them after, it's an American League route or the NHL, they simply go. And I think that's the transformational nature of the USHL. And we're not just developing players; we're developing coaches, general managers, trainers, equipment managers. So all across the spectrum, we're moving people onto every level of the game, and I think that's probably about the best compliment we can make.
And you're also getting strong crowds. Like, I made a joke before that I was cut 2 years in a row, but the team that cut me was the Sioux Falls Stampede, and that rink, the Denny, has become a hotbed for the NCAA tournament as well. They get great crowds over there in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. It's actually where our sponsor OutWest is based out of, so shout out to them too. But can you talk about just the following and the fan bases of the USHL as well? Because you bring in big names like Fantilli, Celebrini, all these fans want to watch these young kids before
all
they
the U.S. national team players. They all play in the USHL, and I don't think a lot of people realize that.
Yeah, I mean, the USHL is made up of 16 teams. Sioux Falls is certainly a special place. Their wiener dog race game, with 11,025 fans last year. I think the league's overall attendance was about 1.5 million last year. Wow. And what was really interesting is our following on Flow Sports was up 37%. And I think that has a lot to do with some of the changes we made in how we approach social media and things like that. So from that standpoint, people are getting to see our games. We've done a lot of live to streaming games for free so that people didn't have to pay. That was compliments of Flow Sports. So I think from those standpoints, we're really doing well on that front. In terms of Canadians not knowing our league, I'll push back a little bit on that, in that, about 80% of the USHL is American players. The next tranche of that is Canadian players. And so when you look at, let's say, the CHL, 92% of their league is Canadian. Mm-hmm. I think it's fair to say that, the Canadian players, know that this is a pathway to develop. And we've been, because we have to develop for college and pro, we have to keep that student athlete perspective in mind. So there's no other league that is more uniquely positioned than the USHL, to develop players. There's a reason why half of college hockey is from the USHL, from only 16 teams. We're really good at what we do. Our GMs, our coaches, all of our team support, they understand the mission for these players. And it is a players first, mentality.
Well, you brought up some numbers there, and you're talking about the NHL. I saw a stat and about basically like players that are drafted into the National Hockey League based on the fact that like you only have 16 teams and the CHL has 60 something teams. Can you give us those numbers to put in perspective, like, players per league that are getting drafted and where the USHL fits into that category?
Sure. I want to be careful here because I have my own personal motto is Teddy Roosevelt: speak softly and carry a custom Bauer hockey stick. How to plug our sponsor.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that when you break down the numbers, we do it on the aggregate of the entire league, all 16 teams. I know there's some out there as well, you can't count NTDP. Well, yeah, we can, because they play in our league. That's a team in our league. We would be saying, well, we're not going to count London in OHLs. Like, it's just an absurd notion.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
Trying to be humble about it, the USHL over the last 8 seasons has more NHL drafted players than any other individual league in the world. That's a fact. That's verifiable. You can look up those numbers. And recently, Brad L.H. Schlossman, who's a phenomenal reporter, covers college hockey based out of Grand Forks, he kind of took a deeper dive on that and said, well, even if you remove NTDP on a per team basis, the USHL is still, this past year's draft had 1.6 players per team drafted out of. That's an awesome number. All of the other leagues are below that. So again, trying to be humble about it. All of those other leagues that contribute to the NHL are all good leagues. There's no question about it. We just have some uniqueness to the USHL that just, gives us an edge and an advantage.
Yeah, well, I think these players have gotten smart and realizing that by taking this USHL to college path, or maybe not to college, but it gives them more flexibility and control over when they sign, how they fit into the NHL CBA, how long they have until they're a free agent, all of those things. And, with especially with Cutter Gauthier, with Rutger McGroarty, those things have been on the forefront with decisions that those guys have made because they went those routes. So I think all those numbers were important. I think that introduction for our listeners was important. But now I want to get into the stuff that is more intriguing and more of the reason I really did want to have you on. And it's this whole CHL NCAA ruling that is on the horizon in November. And I just want to start by saying this to you. I've personally have flipped back and forth thinking this could be good. Maybe it's not good. It doesn't matter if I think it's good. It's happening. The NCAA they don't even want to fight lawsuits anymore. They're laying down their armor every which way. And the best example that I've seen with this whole, CHL or European players becoming eligible is in golf. When you have an amateur golfer who can qualify to play in the U.S. Open, if he wins, he can't take the prize money unless he wants to forfeit, but he can play and he can have expenses paid for in order to play. As college hockey players, Glenn, we have to, I had to pay for my own way to go to the Colorado Avalanche development camp after I was drafted. I had to pay a fee to go, right? They paid for my flight, but I had to pay a fee. Okay. I think that's how it was. Why can golfers do it and why can't hockey players do it? And what do you make of this whole NCAA CHL situation?
Well, so I think the NCAA recognizes that they do have a lot of inconsistencies in their rules. I think that's what they call terming it for modernization. So I think they're having some of their own challenges, is why they lose lawsuits. You can't have differentials in the rules, and at least that seems to be how a lot of their court cases have gone. Now under NCAA rules, it's under 12.2.2. It deals with the term actual and necessary expenses, which includes meals and lodging and equipment and coaching and health insurance. There's a bunch of things that fall into that. Beyond that, receiving compensation, that aspect doesn't seem to be changing. They didn't address what they call vicarious professionalism. So those things are yet to be addressed. And I give kudos to the Division I Council, because there was the notion that they were just going to vote this through this week, and they didn't. They paused it, and I think they want to get more information and gather information from places like USA Hockey, the USHL, possibly the NHL, so that they have a better understanding of how the ecosystem of hockey works. I think you would all agree that hockey, for the development of college athletes, is far different than any other sport. Every other sport, their athletes through high school sports. That does not happen in hockey. In Division I, 95% of all Division I players will have played junior hockey prior to entering college. So there are uniquenesses to our sport. And so, just to put a bow on the issue, for the USHL, rules change, landscapes change. We were hit with COVID. Our league still operated. We found ways to play games safely and to make sure we had a vibrant experience for our players, so that it didn't hit them in their important development year stages. You're starting to see some of those effects now happen with those players that were 13, 14 during COVID and where they're at now. So there's definitely challenges. I think for the NCAA, I think they're still grappling with the notion of, look at their principles. Their number one item listed in their principles is amateurism. We're guided by the Amateur Sports Act for all NGB sports. All Olympic sports in the United States are governed by the Amateur Sports Act. So I think they're still trying to grapple with how to reconcile this and still keep, all of their sports vibrant. I'm not sure how they arrive there.
Mm-hmm.
But will change. Our owners, our GMs, our coaches will adapt to whatever the rules are. We're not part of a collective bargaining agreement. We didn't get here, without having committed all of the hard work, all the financial resources. Our ownership, in order to meet these tier 1 standards, which are, identical to major junior in terms of the things you provide your players, it's a $6 million investment every year by our owners to meet those standards. So I'm very confident that whatever the rules are, we're going to be able to navigate through. And I certainly won't speak for the programs we feed. It's certainly in the interest of the National Hockey League and USA Hockey that the USHL remain a vibrant league. And I'm very confident that will continue.
Well, that's one thing I wanted to talk to you about as well. And I also wanted to say, for the people in our chat, feel free to ask questions. We'll read them, because I'm sure a lot of people, including myself, have a ton of questions with everything going on in this. But Glenn, I don't mean to necessarily challenge you here by this question. Okay, if I can. But I spoke to a assistant coach in NCAA yesterday who was a former head coach in the USHL. I'm not going to name him just in case he doesn't want to be named. Okay. But the point that he made was, right now, it feels like USA Hockey is finally winning this battle against Hockey Canada, right? We're getting the top players from Canada to come into the USHL and then go into college. If you allow the CHL players to go to college, instead of having to come to the USHL, how do we convince them to continue to come here if they can go to college anyway? And the guys that I'm talking about, are the Fantillis, the Celebrinis, who could have the option to stay closer to home and play in Canada and even potentially get paid, a couple $100 a week by those leagues. What would now stop them from doing that, when it feels like the only benefit here when it comes to the CHL versus the USHL is for the CHL? I mean, that just seems to be the case. I mean, I would love to hear your opinion on that.
Yeah, I'm going to push back, because
please do.
If you look at college hockey right now, it's 62% American, and the overwhelming majority of the remaining players are Canadian. So to suggest that Canadian players aren't finding their way to college hockey through other pathways, there are other leagues that contribute to college hockey. So there's pathways, and I think this whole argument is kind of overblown about, there's this terrible disadvantage. I think the CHL mindset and culture has been heavily directed at becoming professional hockey players. And the USHL's approach is just a bigger tent approach. We try to develop for pro and for college, and we've got the mechanisms in place take a look at the numbers from college hockey or for just college sports in general in terms of academic performance. Men's hockey is always great. Graduation rate 93%. In fact, the return rate, players that leave to go play pro and then come back to finish their degree, also impacts that score. So, I think we're going to continue to attract those players. I have very, very competitive owners and general managers that they live and die on every recruit. So they're going to be aggressive. We've got a very proven track record. I don't think there's anything that can dispute that. So I think that will continue. I think we'll continue to attract players. There's also a desire of players to want to have the American hockey experience. I mean, there's a reason why we're slightly lower in American numbers than the CHL is in Canadian numbers. They're much 92%. So I think we attract the best players from around the world. I believe right now we're sitting, I think roughly about 80% American. I think there's about 60 players that are Canadian and 45 that are European in the league right now. And that's an awesome thing. It's a good experience for all of those athletes. And so I think we've been a really trusted method of advancement to college hockey. And I don't think that's going to change. So I hope, at least with the numbers, I hope that kind of gives you a sense of how, just looking at how college hockey is structured. I think we're going to continue to serve in the same way.
We have a question in the chat from Fourth Line asking, would the USHL ever merge with the CHL? That's something that I'd be interested in too. Like, the Memorial Cup is one of the cooler things in Canada. If the USHL can have a team like represented in that too, that'd be pretty awesome for North America.
I've been really fortunate over this last year. I'm starting my second year as commissioner. All of the CHL commissioners have changed. Dan McKenzie's been there, I think, for 5 years. He heads up the CHL. Dan Neer in the WHL. I've not had the pleasure of meeting with Mr. Crawford, but have with Mario Cecchini from the Q. And there's been several occasions, I also think maybe intentionally structured by the National Hockey League, to put us all in the same room together. It's been great. It's been both formal and informal, and the discussions have been phenomenal. And we've had these conversations. I had a nice invite from Dan McKenzie to attend the Memorial Cup this year. Had a great experience. They treated me really well, and I watched the level of play. I have no doubt that the USHL will fit perfectly in that, and so I certainly welcome the conversation. And we've had some dialogue about how do we work together, what does that look like, and I think if you look at it objectively, I think all of us, being in the room together, how do we find ways to work together? Because what we do at our level, we've perfected. So is the CHL. We're all really good at it. The bigger challenge for us, and I think the same for Canada, is what's happening at the younger age levels. Right now, hockey is so costly. We're starting to see players that only can afford to play at the AAA level. And a lot of the more talented players are not getting that opportunity because it's so expensive. And as you all know, the development path, you'll see a 14-year-old who looks like a phenom, and by the time he's 17, he's kind of fitting in as an average player. So every player's development path is different. We have some really big challenges at the younger age levels, diversity being one of them. We want a more diverse sport. I think the NHL and USA Hockey have made that clear. We have our own plans on making and contributing to that pathway and making sure that we attract the very best athletes. So, what we do, we're fine at our level. It's what's happening down below, the cost factor and accessibility. If you think about how every single young athlete's childhood athlete, where they experience their first youth sports experience, it's in their hometown. Mm-hmm. There's a reason why, and I know I'll probably get vilified for this. There's 20% of the USHL is made up of players from Minnesota. There's a reason. I got a tweet or a text message from my friend and colleague, the head of Minnesota Hockey, Steve Olheiser, to talk about the state of Minnesota had more players than any other state in the union that were in NHL lineups on opening night.
Yeah. And listen, it doesn't surprise me.
It's community-based hockey. That's why It's affordable. It's accessible.
Mm-hmm.
Across the country, and you're gonna, you'll explode the game. I marvel at what they do. I love their model, and there's always some pushback because we're taking some of their best
Yeah.
It's been working for both of us.
All right, so I'm gonna ask you a couple of questions here in the chat, Glenn, and then I do have a follow-up question that's more a technical thing on how hockey players transferring works. But another question from the fourth line in our chat: will the USHL be adding teams? Like, what are the expansion plans for this league? And I just want to preface it by saying one of the things, in my opinion, that makes your league so good is that it is small. I think when I played in the USHL, Glenn, in Lincoln, I don't think we had more than 12 or maybe we had 14 teams in the league. It was a very small league. Madison wasn't in the league. Dubuque wasn't in the league. Muskegon wasn't in the league.
Wow.
And every night you were playing against someone who was getting drafted in the top 2 or 3 rounds, and you were playing against a team that had guys going to North Dakota, Minnesota, BU, BC. I mean, the talent pool was insanely good in that league, especially when it was like at 12 teams.
Well, so when was that? Was that like 1975? Colby, is that about right?
Hey, you're older than me, pal, so take it easy.
Not by much. So and I do remember all the gray hair you gave me over the years, Colby. The USHL has been at 16 teams plus or minus one since I believe it was 2010.
Okay.
And so there have been, over the last year, there has been a major uptick in interest in the league. We are considering several markets. Ultimately, this is a decision that the owners make. And they understand that I am only going to bring them opportunities that I think make sense and are good for the league. We have had we currently have an NHL owner who owns an NHL team who's an owner in the league. We've been contacted at least by 2 other NHL owners that have expressed an interest in the league. We've had several Canadian groups reach out and have expressed interest in joining the USHL. And there's probably about 6 legitimate opportunities that will be on the table for us to review. And I think it's very possible. And we'll have a staggered approach to it, where we could be adding 2 to 4 teams over the next 2 to 3 seasons.
Got it. Okay.
So that is not a Glenn Hefferan decision. That is a decision that is made by our owners, and
right.
I think that's just important to note.
But I think they brought you in here because they trust in your opinion, your guidance, your advisement. I know. They came looking for you when you became, when you got this job. You did not go looking for it. And I know that to be true, not from what you've told me, but from, talking to people around hockey. So there is another question that I had written down here that's pretty interesting to me. And this was something somebody made me aware of from USA Hockey. And I said, geez, that's a pretty interesting thought, how this works. So let's talk about the transfers between USA Hockey, Hockey Canada, how all that works, because I know this, like when a player comes from Europe, there's a European transfer agreement. When we have youth hockey players with the Titans, we have to get a youth hockey, transfer signed by their hockey federation. We have a kid who plays on one of our teams from Israel. So we had the Israeli Ice Hockey Federation has to sign something. How will that work, Glenn, if we do have a situation where, players are, maybe a player's playing in the CHL and this changes, right? They're a 16-year-old. This rule changes and they're like, you know what? I want to go play in Chicago because I want to be seen by Michigan and Wisconsin. So they then want to leave the Sudbury Wolves, and I'm just completely making that up, right? And they want to come play for the Chicago Steel. How will that work as far as, are there contracts that get in the way? Is there visa issues that get in the way? And how easy of a process is or could that be?
And could you even go back? Could you go back if you wanted to go back to Canada after coming?
So once you play a game in either federation, you are bound to that team until the team decides to release you, trade you. Okay. In the U.S. side of it, we don't operate under contracts, although I'm sure that will be a discussion point going forward. and how that will work. So the IHF kind of guides the international transfer rules, particularly as it relates to European players. USA Hockey and Hockey Canada have a transfer agreement that supersedes that, and it just makes for a workable arrangement. It's an older document. It needs updating, or as the NCAA likes to say, it needs modernization. That was written by Jim Johansson, over 15 years ago. And I think obviously that this has been a discussion point with us in USA Hockey that, the agreement needs updating, and, we're on the same playing field, and it needs to work that way. So I think there's a lot of discussion that still is yet to be had on what that will look like. But in the present, players that are in state or in the CHL, you now need to be traded if consent. So no one's moving in the middle of the season. It doesn't work that way. And I think that's an important issue for everyone, irrespective of what league you are. Roster stability. I mean, you hear this conversation in the NCAA. Roster stability is so critical. And now you see college hockey mirroring what we do in youth hockey with, players jumping around. And so I think roster integrity and stability is going to be an important issue for everybody. And I think there'll be conversations about that, in the very, very near future.
I will say, I know people have their opinion about the transfer portal, but, as someone who, had to redshirt and sit out for a full year, I'm very happy that they got rid of that, because that was like the most depressing and miserable year of my life. Like, I'm not even trying to get deep or whatever. Just saying, like, the fact that a first line guy can jump schools and a guy who's unhappy in a situation can jump schools and get a better opportunity for himself. Like, I think that has changed so much for the better when it comes to this product. My last question, and again, I appreciate your time this morning, Glenn. This is a question actually that I had myself, but also somewhat asked by Steve Gross in the chat, and it's in regards to and the term amateurism now, because it feels like we're headed in a direction where calling these players, whether it's even down to the USHL and the CHL, amateurs now is kind of going out the window with NIL and players being able to take money and whatnot. Is that a direction that we're headed in, where they'll no longer be called amateurs, or where do you see that playing out?
I think there's a little bit of confusion about NIL versus being compensated.
Pay to play.
Okay. Let's clear that up. Yeah.
I mean, how it would be any different that if you play for the Lincoln Stars and the local car dealership decides to hire you as their spokesperson, right? You're working a job. It's a job. Now for NIL, you guys talked about this in yesterday's show. It proves that I do, guys.
Snaps.
A little bit more than you. That Colby is. No, I'm teasing Colby. Well, he grinds your gears, so I figured.
Always. You're welcome to it.
Thank you. I think there are restrictions with respect to international athletes taking advantage of NIL. I know there's legislation sitting in the federal government that would kind of open that up, but then you have counter legislation that is talking about, restricting, non-U.S. citizens in the scholarship lane. So it's going to be interesting to watch how this House settlement agreement levels that playing field. They're talking about $22 million in payroll. Well, now if you're paid, you're going to be a paid athlete, right? So there's a lot of things that are going to come together. And for us as being part of a national governing body, there's definite advantages from an antitrust standpoint. And, the issue of paying players to play and perform, invokes a lot of other issues in terms of fair labor practices. We're not in that lane, and I'm grateful not to be in that lane. We have players that absolutely have NIL deals, and we welcome that, and we try to find ways, if it conflicts with current sponsors, we try to find ways to manage those things. And I'm thrilled when we see our players get NIL deals, and it's great for them, and we want to see them take advantage of that. We don't want that certainly to change. I think the lane we're in might actually be more appealing to, let's say, others that are not in the amateur lane. And I'll leave it there.
Yeah. Well, and just to even, go further with Glenn's comment, he's talking about legislation in the U.S. Senate, and what I have learned about this whole NIL thing with these these non-U.S. players. So if you're from Canada, you're from Europe, you are on a student visa, so you cannot have a job here. Now you can earn passive income, which I explained on the show yesterday, but you cannot earn income unless it is passive. And you can Google the definition of that, and there's probably lots of interpretations for all that. So that's kind of where those guys get put into a bubble of it has to be passive income. That needs to change for these guys. But the U.S. government moves at a snail's pace. We can all agree on that, no matter how we feel about any of that. So, look, Glenn, it was great having you on.
Section on amateurism and athletics eligibility. It's Article 12 of the NCAA bylaws. When you read it, I promise you this, you will be scratching your head afterwards going, well, wait a minute. And because a lot of it does seem to conflict, and so, which is probably why they've had these challenges in the litigation area. So,
and it doesn't even seem like the NCAA's interest in more litigation. They've completely laid down their armor. It's so funny, this whole thing that's happening, because this is actually something in my own family that has been, this goes back so many years because of my first cousin being Jeremy Bloom. And this is a guy who in like the early 2000s, he was a skier and a football player, and he sued the NCAA because they took away his amateur status based on his skiing endorsements, which he needed to fund his skiing career. So he was knocked out of the NCAA after 2 years, forced to enter the NFL draft way too early, is considering going after the NCAA right now, like other players are. Former players, but I would urge you to Google the, Jeremy Bloom NCAA. He's a football player. So this is, funny enough, something that has been so, vivid in my family for a number of years because of Jeremy's situation. So now watching it all unfold, him and I are always texting about it, and it's mostly just like sarcastic emojis that he's sending me back when these things are happening. I know he's enjoying watching the NCAA get their ass kicked.
I would say this, I think for the sake of all collegiate sports, but more particularly for hockey, hockey is the third highest grossing revenue sport on a per team basis. We certainly understand where football, and again, there's 100,000 male Division I athletes, 1,800 of them are hockey players. 25% of them are playing football or basketball. At the end of the day, I think college sports needs to be careful to not create more haves and have-nots. And that is I think that is a prevailing concern that we heard in May during the coaches convention in Florida. Like, you just can't keep creating more, because eventually that pool will then start shrinking. What's going to be left? What are you going to have? 20 college teams left? One of the other topics that no one's covered or spent enough time on is the 35 university schools in Canada that have really good programs. Okay, but they're all mostly CHL players.
Yeah, they're good. They're good teams.
They're playing some of the Division I teams.
They do.
So, there's a lot more to this than just what's being covered, in the front page of the media on this stuff. So
yeah, I mean, look, every year, Glenn,
conversation about it.
Every year at BU, we started the year with either UAB or New Brunswick, like one of these schools. So look, Glenn, you know what? I say this to you all the time, and I hope your PR team is watching this, and the communications wing of the USHL. They need to get you out there speaking more often, because I just think that you shed so much interesting light on these topics, and we've had so many conversations, and I never don't hang up, and I'm like, interesting, or like, I wasn't thinking about that, or like, geez, like, more times than not, when I'm calling you, it's because I need my mind changed about something, because I know that I'm probably wrong. So great having you on today. I know you follow the show. You're always, giving me shit about it or reaching out, about the show. So, make sure
just for all the time you pick on Johnny. That's all.
Exactly. He does defend you all the time. And
I love that. I need that.
I'm not a Ranger fan, Johnny, either. So just
Glenn, my mom would love you. Thank you for saying that.
All right, Glenn, look, you have a good day, and we'll talk soon. Okay, Glenn?
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And again, Colby, that was awesome. And I didn't really know how to ask this, but my last thought on the whole CHL NCAA potential merge is, what it means for players like me. I mean, we talk about it all the time. Like, our college and upbringing in hockey were a little bit different. Like, my fear if I was 16, 17 right now would be that these CHL kids are going to come into the States and take my spot at a Division I school, right? Like I was a late bloomer, fringe Division I guy. I'm not gonna call myself a fringe Division I guy. I played Division I hockey, but
you
know,
played in Hockey East Division
but I wasn't
you're not a fringe Division I hockey player.
But I wasn't a high recruit, so I'd be worried that, now instead of just scouting out of the USHL, the NAHL, and like the BCHL, which is where typically the college hockey players and maybe the AJHL and CCHL and those leagues as well in Canada have come from. Now the fear would be like, oh, there's a third liner on London who's not going to get drafted and not going to sign. Like, one school will pick him up and he'll probably be a better recruit than me. Like that'd be my fear.
Let me try to ease your fear a little bit.
Yeah.
There is still an NCAA clearinghouse.
Yeah.
There is still requirements, U.S. requirements, schooling requirements. Okay. So I don't think we're just going to see this faucet go on and this massive influx of players. I don't. Now, look, there are already a few CHL players that are committed to Division I. There's a kid who plays in the Q that just committed to go to Cornell. Now, granted, right now that's illegal, but they're expecting it to be legal. So I do understand your point. I think it's fair.
Well, that would just be like, I'm trying to think as like a young kid right now dealing with this. That would be my fear.
Yeah. Well, look, I think that, that's totally reasonable. And look, one thing that I want to highlight from that interview is the fact that, you have a league commissioner who is a working partner to the NCAA, the National Hockey League. Glenn has spoken very highly to me about the commissioners of the Canadian Hockey League privately. I hope it's okay that I'm saying that. He has said that to me privately. Luckily, it's all good stuff. But look, I've said to him the amount of times that I've texted Glenn and said, hey, we got to get a USHL, the team that wins the Clark. We got to get that team and somehow into some North American tournament with the teams that win the CHL and let's have a North American Cup. And one thing that I know about Glenn, and I know this because he has run the USA Hockey District that I came up in for a long time, and he's been heavily involved. Glenn is an innovative thinker. He is not, there's a lot of criticism in hockey that there's an old boys club and we resist change. Glenn is the opposite of that. He's a guy who wants to listen to everyone. He wants to hear different walks of life, different experiences. So many times I've reached out to him to be like, hey, this was my experience. Why is it so different now? And he's like, Colby, you can't look at everything through the lens of your own experience because your experience is different than most. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like that makes a lot of sense. And that's fair and reasonable. So, I give him a lot of credit for his openness, his willingness to, sit in a room and have conversations that are really important, that are going to affect not just the OHL, the Dub, the USHL, the NHL. It's going to affect mite and peewee hockey players, which is the base of hockey. If we don't have hundreds of thousands of hockey players, then we don't have a feeder system in either country to the National Hockey League. So it was a great interview. I see from the chat, I think everybody really liked and appreciated it. As these things evolve and progress, we'll have Glenn on again because look, he's the type of guy that's not afraid to be like, hey, I thought one thing and we're facing something different. So we will certainly keep you guys updated and we will certainly keep Glenn in our stable of guests that we try to have on at another point as this situation starts to unfold. So if you're with us and you like that interview and you appreciate it, do us a favor, give us a like on YouTube. Our likes on these episodes, they do go a long way. If you're not subscribed to the Daily Faceoff YouTube page, make sure you subscribe. We've got live shows all day and we've got more in the works. What you see right now is not what this lineup is going to look like all season. We are going to continue to grow as a network. We are going to continue to build as a network. So make sure you're with us here at the Daily Faceoff, Johnny.
I'm laughing because Glenn is still in our chat and he asked if the girlfriend showed up last night. I said it 5 times. Not my girlfriend.
Wow.
Thank you for putting me on the hot seat, Glenn. Yeah, thank you. He is a loyal listener.
Did she show up last night? Did she
come? I told her not to come. It was literally all dudes there. And
you were just too much of a legend. You didn't want to blow it up.
I was just crushing beers, kissing babies, giving high fives.
You don't want her to
Intimidated.
To like you for the wrong reasons, your fame. We don't want her to like you for your fame. We want her to like you for that great smile that you bring to us every morning and all that sunshine and positivity that you bring to Morning Cup of Hockey.
But I will say she's not like a sports girl at all. And she told me she like Googled to see if the Rangers won, which I thought was very nice and thoughtful. But there are some other things we got to get into. So a big thanks again to Glenn for coming on, because that was, again, like these things that are going on right now. Like I have a lot of questions. Colby has a lot of questions. Like there is no set understanding, right, between the two leagues merging. So we're going to continue to have those questions. I'm sure our chat will as well. And we're happy to answer those questions. We apologize for not like diving into all 5 games last night. Just we thought this interview would be very important for everything going on right now and how relevant it is. And with that, we also, or I personally caught up with Pat Maroon yesterday. And like Colby and I have said on previous episodes, we're getting Pat on every single week. It's awesome to have a current NHL player to give us perspective on things going around the league from a player's perspective. But, you know, with that being week to week, it's going to be tough to get Pat on here live. You know, he was in Utah yesterday, 3-hour, 2-hour time difference. I messed it up with the time actually yesterday. And he
live every week, but we will get him live. He will be joining us live more times than not. I do want to specify that. We've had to be very flexible with him over the first couple of weeks of the season, which is totally understandable. So I know you caught up with him yesterday, Johnny, for 15 minutes or so, just to talk about the whole Utah thing. Next week,
we also talked about this topic too. We talked about the CHL.
Yeah. So next week, we're going to do everything we can to get him live, because that will be the goal. So, Johnny, I'll let you take it from here, because I know you're the one who took this thing home.
Yeah, so before we kick it over to Pat, just want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, Fountain Tire. Your family safety is important, and you don't have to settle for a good deal or good customer service, because they do both. They'll treat your vehicle like their own, and if you need new tires or your engine has a little rattle, stop into Fountain Tire, and they'll sort you out. So save up to 25% off select tires, including Goodyear, until October 10th. Plus, save another $50 or more on any service of over $150, with some restrictions applying. So check out fountaintire.com, and with that, let's kick it over to my catch-up interview with Pat Maroon from yesterday. To bring on our third member of Morning Cup of Hockey, fresh off of the first ever game in Utah, Chicago Blackhawks forward Pat Maroon. Pat, I know the game didn't go your guys' way, but I'm curious just to hear about what Utah was like as a road environment, road city. You know, it really looked cool on TV, and I'm wondering what it was like being out there, because it looked like a playoff environment in game 1.
Yeah. Let's just start. You being late. You guys don't know the time.
Yeah, I mixed up the time zone, so I fucked up off the bat here. So sorry about that, Pat.
No, but I think it's going to be a great atmosphere. It was packed. The fans were wild. They were very loud. Seems like the city has a lot of buzz around the Utah Hockey Club. So the environment was great. The facility was awesome. Obviously, the seating arrangements were, I think, pretty bad for some people behind the net,
like view or whatever.
Yeah. But it seems like they're fixing that for fans. I think he's doing that next summer. But you know, the buzz around the rink, the owner just seems like a great guy, loves the team. He's passionate about the players. You know, just talking to Portuzo after the game, just seems like, you know, he's in it, and he wants the best for the players. So, but the fans were great. Environment was awesome. They were loud. I feel like it's going to be like that all season long. So, obviously it was a tough start for us. But you know, I thought the first period was just okay. I thought the second and third period, though, I thought we took it to them. I thought, you know, we had opportunities. You know, we hit 3 posts. You know, two empty nets.
I think 5 posts actually.
5 posts.
Yeah.
So I mean, you know, we had those. Bertuzzi missed that one. The goalie made a pad save. Kurashev missed that one, and then Halsey. You know, Donato in the second period. You know, we
you
had
fed Donato on that one too, right?
Yeah. We had chances on all of those, and I think you know, just didn't capitalize on them. But you know, it's growing. You know, we have a lot of new faces on our team. I really liked our effort in the second and third. That's good to see. And I think most importantly, new faces, guys are still trying to get in it, trying to find ways around lines. Everyone's trying to find their way. So tough loss for us, but I liked our response in the second and third, and I liked our compete in the third to make it interesting, and almost Bertuzzi almost ties it up with 1:30 left without the post. So we had our chances to bring it to overtime, but you learn from those, and you kind of move forward, and we look at video.
I'm kind of curious what it was like though the night before, because I imagine not many of you guys had been to Utah before or Salt Lake City. Like I've never been there personally, and I imagine there aren't, outside of hockey and skiing, no offense to the city, many reasons to go there. So exploring a new city, trying to find a restaurant or like a steakhouse to go to for a night before a game kind of meal. What was that like for you guys?
It was good. Our team set up a team dinner with everyone, staff, and everyone at STK. So there's an STK in town. Mm-hmm. The city looks beautiful. We're going into Park City today. A couple of the guys to kind of hang out, explore. I'm looking forward to it. It's beautiful here. It's going to be like 80 degrees. I'm looking forward to it. I think Utah is going to be a great visiting, road city to visit.
I apologize for the New York City siren background. I'm not sure if you're picking up on that.
No, I'm not.
Okay, good. But yeah, no, I'm happy you guys found a good spot, though.
I think guys will love it. I think road teams will love playing here and love just exploring the city.
I don't want to focus too much on the game, but the broadcast was really highlighting you and Liam O'Brien. And I saw you guys line up next to each other for your first shift. And, I saw you give him a nice little bump there into the boards when the puck wasn't really near him. That was it was nice. The refs didn't pick up on that one. But was that something that was going on in your mind throughout the game? Because I know he obviously is a guy who wants to put on a show in his first game in front of the new fans. And I'm sure you didn't want to give him that, right? Like, is that something that's being talked about?
No, I would have gave it to him right away. I asked him to go.
Oh, you did?
I mean, yeah. So I don't know what his intentions were, but Liam's a competitor. I mean, you got to give it to him. Like, he's not that big. He'll stick in and fight anyone he wants, and seems like he gets that team going a lot. You kind of tip your cap to guys like that, but nothing against him. I don't know. Going, a new barn, new team in town, but that just goes with, I don't know. So, I mean, sometimes it's all weird though. Like, with all that stuff,
like
you
picking and choosing your spot.
You think you're gonna fight, but then you don't fight. So it's like it's hit or miss sometimes. But like I said, he's a competitor. He plays hard. He fights anyone and anyone. I don't think it was like a no answer. I think it was just he wanted to play maybe and just get the juices flowing, get into it a little bit. And
I'm assuming you weren't mic'd up in the end of the game?
No, I was not.
I don't want to ask what was being said, but you were definitely letting the bench hear it. Curious what kind of just like led to that.
Well, he was staring at our bench, and I just
that was him.
Appreciate that, and I for that reason, I don't know, like whatever happened with Keller and Murph, and then what was the other guy's name? Dries.
I'm blanking on who it was at the end of the game.
Whoever Murphy fought, the defenseman number 50 there. He was
Jersey, right?
What?
Sean Dursey, I believe it was.
Yeah. So he was just staring at our bench, and like, sometimes it's like, fuck you, like, don't fuck. It's you guys won. Like, you guys got an empty net. Congratulations. Like, don't act tough and stare at our bench. Like, and I don't appreciate that. Like, you're disrespecting our team one, and you're staring at us like you're gonna do something and be tough. Like, just go away. Like, if you guys got your empty net, get off the ice. Whatever. So I just kind of snapped. You're showing disrespect to our team, and I didn't like what he was doing in that moment. And I think it's out of respect, to be honest with you. And whatever, if you're staring at Murph, staring at our team, like, just get away. Like, don't even stare at a bench and like be cool and act tough. Like, if you're gonna do something, like, come over the bench or go grab Murph again. Like, that's my taking on it. So it is what it is. It's over. Now we know.
Yeah, and it looked like there was also one play, and I'm sorry, I don't want to harp on this game too much. I just had one more question about it.
No, you're good.
Where Foligno took a tough hit, it looked like, and Bedard actually came up to defend him. Obviously Connor didn't drop his gloves or anything, but seeing that out of him, it seems like he's been, you know, a little chippy in the preseason. Is that something that's caught you by surprise? Because it seems to be picking up a little bit as the games go on here.
I think it's great. I think, you know, it's great. You know, that shows he's into the game. He's emotionally engaged. He's, you know, intense. I think, you know, he's just playing the game hard. He's getting to the dirty areas. He's, you know, fighting back when guys are pushing him around. And I think that's great to see. I think he's starting, it's his second year. He's starting to realize, you know, he's going to, people are out to get him, right? Not in a dirty way, but they're going to be playing hard against him. They're going to be in his face. And
so it's not just because he knows you have him backing him up.
I don't think so. No, Fliggy's really tough too.
Yeah.
Like, I think Nick Foligno's really tough. So I don't think that's the case. I think he's just maybe, you know, it's like when Connor and McKinnon and Cooch and all those guys give it back, right? So it's like you saw Cooch in the preseason, you know, stick up for his teammates. I think it's little things like that, you know, they're just emotionally engaged in the game and they know people are, you know, coming. They're going to be after him. They're going to be in their face all night. And I think he's starting to get used to that and, you know, fighting back and getting more engaged into the game. But, yeah, I think it's great to see.
Yeah. And, you know, with this road trip, I think you guys have 3 games left on it, right? You go to Winnipeg, Edmonton, and Calgary. And, you know, being it is that you are a veteran, I'm sure you've had your fair share of seasons that start out on the road, start out at home. Is this something that you prefer with a new team to be on the road to start the year so you can get to know the new guys? And, you know, is there anyone that you've, you know, really kind of taken under your wing here in the first couple travel days?
No, I think it's great. Yeah, I think starting on the road is good. Obviously, we have a tough schedule, so obviously we have to focus on one game at a time here. But yeah, it's better to maybe start on the road with a lot of new faces on the team. Get to know the guys a little bit. You know, enjoy a team dinner. You know, build that camaraderie around the group. You know, around the room. You know, make guys feel a little more comfortable. Because you know, when you're at home, you know, guys have families. It's hard for guys to get away to go do things with the boys. So I think this is a great way to get everyone involved now and you know, get that camaraderie in the room. You know, so I think it's going to be good for us being on the road here and, you know, doing some little team bonding stuff. So,
any pranks yet?
Not yet, but I'm sure there'll be a couple in this room. Oh yeah.
Yeah. All right, that's awesome. I can't wait to see the first one. But a big theme of today's episode was, and I'm not sure, you can be honest, like, I'm not sure if you've been following it or not, the NCAA and CHL like merging, where CHL players are now going to be eligible to play in the NCAA. And I know you played junior hockey, didn't go the college route, but what would be your, I guess, initial thoughts on these two leagues merging? Because it seems like it might be a disadvantage for the American players, obviously a big advantage for the Canadian players, but curious if there's any talks about it in the locker rooms and whatnot.
Yeah, I don't think there'll be too much turnover though, in my opinion. You know, listen, like if you're a great player going to the OHL, I mean, it's a great league, or you're going to a CHL, you know, the Q, the Dub, whatever, you're going to any program that's in the CHL. Listen, I think it's going to be great for overagers that played their 4th year and they're aging out of juniors, that they have an opportunity that, you know, one overager comes in and puts up the numbers, but he never got drafted. He has an opportunity now, instead of going to Canadian college, he has an opportunity to go American college, play Division I, maybe play another 4 years, and, you know, keep producing, keep developing, and then, you know, he's out at 24 years old, and then he can go play pro. You know, I think it'll expand guys' careers a little bit more that are in the CHL in that sense, where guys that go and like I said, like overagers or, you know, 3rd-year guys that, you know, didn't really get drafted or maybe didn't, you know, haven't really sniffed a lot.
Yeah.
I feel like those are the guys that are going to go to Division I. I think guys are set on either going to the CHL or college, you know. That's my take on it. I think right now college route is the best way to go, in my opinion. Like I said, I have a son in the game right now that's playing. He's 16. I think the developing of playing 2 years of juniors, of going as a true freshman if that happens, and then you have 4 more years to develop. I think it's better. But now, like I said, it could change a lot in that sense, where if you go to the doesn't really work out after 4 years, now you go play college and then you have another 4 years. To me, I think that's great for the game, because you're expanding the game a little bit more, and then, you get more eyes on you too, in that sense of, like, if you, do well or just an average player in the O, and then you go to the college and you do better and your game kind of takes off, you keep developing in that sense. I think that's great for the game, because I think it's going to be a win-win for either side, CHL or NCAA. I think you're going to get guys that are on the bubble of that sense, that are 40-point, 50-point guys, or an overager that lights it up and then, doesn't sign anywhere and goes to college. I think it can go both ways in that sense. So I'm really looking forward to see what happens and where this goes, because I'm really interested by it.
Yeah, same here. I'm sure it'll be a talking point throughout the entire season as well. And Pat, I want to thank you again for hopping on today. I know we'll be in touch every week here. You guys got a couple of road games heading up, so safe travels, and we'll talk to you next week, all right?
Yeah, must be nice. Colby has a nice day off today, huh?
He's doing the Daily Face-Off live, so he's filling in for a different show. So not a total day off, but we can give him shit anyway for it. But and he'll be a big thanks to Pat Maroon for joining the show. We'll hear from him every week, like Colby and I alluded to before. It's just me to end today's episode. So we're going to get right into our bet of the day, which is presented by Bet365. And the bet that we are going to go with tonight is the Columbus Blue Jackets on the money line on the road. I think the Minnesota Wild are way too overvalued. I believe they're at minus 225 right now. Columbus, you can get at plus 195. Columbus has a lot of players on their roster with a lot to prove. Hopefully a big year from Adam Fantilli, James Van Riemsdyk playing his first game, Zach Aston-Reese, Kevin LeBanc, the recent pickups, Sean Monahan now centering that top line with Boone Jenner. I almost said Bruce Jenner. Boone Jenner being injured. So a lot to look for out of Columbus. And again, this is more about the Minnesota Wild just being way overvalued in this game. I don't think Minnesota is good enough to be a minus 240 favorite. So I like Columbus, who's going to be playing very inspired hockey, to take this game on the road at good value. That's going to wrap it up for this segment. Remember, open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets, whatever the sport, whatever the moment. It's never ordinary at Bet365, so use our code Daily365. Another big thank you to Glenn Hefferan for coming on today's show to explain the merge between the CHL and the NCAA. And a big thank you to Pat Maroon. Like we said, he'll be on, I think, most likely live next Wednesday. We had talked yesterday about his schedule next week. So Wednesday morning, Pat should be joining our show live, so you can get your questions into him from the chat. I know we had a couple people asking about that, especially Bobby Bowe, who is a St. Louis Blues fan, to get a question in for Pat. So stay tuned. We will be back Monday morning, 9 a.m. Thank you, everyone, for listening this week. It was a great first week of NHL action. More games on tonight. Looking forward to a big slate. We'll see you all Monday. Have a great weekend. Stay safe. Enjoy. Love you. And we'll talk 9 a.m. Monday.
What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you need to be hitting the subscribe button right here at Daily Faceoff. Exclusive interviews and analysis from our hockey insider Frank Saravalli, fantasy updates from Brock Sagan, and a daily live show at noon Eastern, Monday through Friday. You don't want to miss any of the fantastic content, so hit that subscribe button.